Hey guys, today we'll be just looking over some basic concepts of Figma. There are plenty more documentation online about what you can do with Figma, what it can provide you. You can even search if you feel like I haven't covered something in the video that you want to focus on, then please give it a good search. Most likely someone has implemented it on Figma before and has created a tutorial for it. But today my main goal is to showcase the basic elements of Figma, especially those elements that help towards collaboration on design. Because when you're working in a large group, you want to make sure, yeah, sure, we have our design from the low fidelity prototype, but how can we make our life easier utilizing Figma for group work? And that's going to be my main focus. So straight into it, I'm going to create a new design file. Epic. So you can see over here, the background color is a bit dark. If I create my frame right now, so frame here, what that means is this is just my web page or the page of my application. Right now, it's very white and it's dark on the outside. That could be fine if you want it, but I know when I was planning my design that I want my background frame to be gray, and that could be hard to see on the black background when we're designing. So I'm actually going to change the background to a different color. Something a little bit lighter. There we go. And I'm going to keep this frame for now as white, and I'll make those changes later on as we get on with the design. Great. So now we have our frame here. Now, when you come to designing a page of an application, you probably have a device in mind. And so how can I make that screen size the same as the screen size on my prototype, the same size as what I want for my device? Well, either you can input it manually. So let's say I'm aiming for 1920 height width, 1080 height for my web page. Okay, that's great. But then I'd have to implement it manually all the time. You have to make sure the team's doing it all good. So that's probably not the best. Another way you can do it is, let's say I went back to frame, and what you see is that on the side for design, they have phone, tablet, desktop presentation. So either I can make it an iPhone, or either I can go back to frame. Sorry, I can go back to frame and I can change it to what I want, which was for the presentation, I wanted it to be 1619, right? So you have different ways to play around with it. Choose what's best for your prototype. Maybe you've done some user research and you found for your product this would be the most helpful. But yeah, so for now I want to use presentation. So now I know how to set my screen size, and just like how when you're designing your prototype, you probably had one screen size in mind rather than all these three. So I'm just going to remove and focus on the one which I want. Remove this as well. So I'm going to rename this. So I've just double clicked it and I'm just going to write homepage. You can see over here I have homepage. These are the layers. This is what will happen here is everything you make will be listed out over here. If you want to hide it or make it not hidden, not seen to the eye, then just press that I. If you want to make sure it's not going to be changed, then just press the lock button, and then you can't access it or interact with it. It's kind of just there. So I'm just going to remove that. I'm just going to delete this frame because I don't need that anymore. Great. So we have homepage. Now, when it comes towards presenting this in a prototype, just like how your screen size on your device, it doesn't change. Like say I was on a phone, the viewport that's available, that won't change. Maybe you have a responsive design, but it's not like your laptop's screen is going to contort according to what design is there. That's the web page itself. So what you do is that in your device, you would set, so over here I have it set to custom design. But usually when you see it, it's going to be set to none when you start off a project. And you have all these different designs to start off from. And right now there is none. So remember I selected over here 1619 for the frame. And it was 1920 by 1080. But when I go to my prototype and I want to create that as my base device size when I'm showing off my prototype, it doesn't have it. So actually what I'll do is I'll head on to custom design. I'm going to do 1920 by 1080. And that way, whenever I present my prototype, which you can present your prototype by pressing this play button here, the screen size it's going to show is 1920 by 1080. If you don't set it, you might have issues where certain screen sizes aren't showing too well. So it's important that you do set it before showing off your prototype. This prototype panel has plenty more functionality, which we'll experience later on. But for now, what I'll focus on is introducing you to everything else on the web page. So over here, we had our frame, which we kind of discussed beforehand. These are the shapes which you can utilize for your application. So rectangles, stars, beautiful. You can also import an image. Pen, pencil. So pen allows you to connect dots together. And then pencil allows you to freehand. Whoopsie daisy. Freehand. There we go. Text box. So it allows you to create a text box and you can write text inside, which is great. Obviously too small. We'll go into what elements allow us to change that. Over here we have our components, plugins, widgets, which will go further detail into what this actually means for our prototype. We also have the hand grab tool, allows us to maneuver the application. Then we finally have the commenting tool, which is kind of key to collaboration. So you can use this, for instance, when you're working with a team member and you found out this component is really hard to implement, or either you've added a new component and you want to discuss with the team, like, hey, it is good, but maybe you don't have a meeting or daily stand-up is done. Having that comment there, the person can see that, you know, you've added that comment. It's pretty evident that the comment's there, no matter how much far they zoom out. But also, if you really want them to notice quickly, you can add them in and discuss with them there. Beautiful. And then when it's resolved, just tick it and it adds up. So similar how the Google Doc commenting works. Great. So we discussed all this functionality here. And obviously when we were adding everything, it came up on the layers component here. So layers, what this means is this is all the components that you'll create. Why is it called layers? Because let's say, for instance, homepage, I put an element, let's say the rectangle. Oopsie daisy, I should go out of that and into the mouse. If I put rectangle inside homepage, you can see layers has changed. And now the homepage, being the parent container, is now holding the rectangle, which is now a child of the homepage. So what this means is that when I go ahead and look at my prototype, you can see it's updated itself, and I can now view that rectangle in the web page. So let's say, for instance, I want the user to view a star and a rectangle together. Well, what happens when I pull out that star and it was actually above the parent component? Like to the eye, if you were just looking at this page, it looks like, well, the star and the rectangle should be both seen on the prototype's page. But when I actually go back to my prototype, you can see I can't see it. And that is an issue, right? But it's an issue which is easily fixed. I'll just pull it back in here. And you might be like, well, that was something very simple. But it's a common design mistake when you're first utilizing Figma, because you'll have so many components here that you can easily lose track of what is actually in the page and what isn't on the page. Great. Also a good way to check as well, in case you didn't notice. So right now we can see star outside of the homepage. Looks fine. If I highlight it, what's actually kept highlighted is the one which is outside the page, and the parent. The child is not highlighted. So that's also a good check as well. Great. So now we've kind of talked about layers. We'll go further into what assets actually mean for us later on. But what we have is these three panels here: design, prototype, and inspect. So design is essentially just adding style to your components. So for instance, for the text size, it's way too small. So I would go over to design and I would maybe change the text size to 40, and I'll put that in the center, and maybe I want it in the center of the text box rather than just in the middle. When we're talking about fill here, it's not actually going to fill the text box. It's going to actually fill as in the text color. We can add stroke. So this is the outline. And then there's certain effects like drop shadow that you can add, layer blur. It's kind of up to you guys what you think is most efficient here. I'm just going to remove it by pressing this minus sign. And then export, you can export the component into PNG, PDF, or whatever you'd prefer. I don't need to export it, so I'm just going to minus that. Great. So we have this component here, which we created, which we might put as our key focus. I'm going to make this have a stroke that's really thick. So that way, there we go. And I'm going to put a fill. I'm going to make the fill red. Great. Now, let's say that I have teammates, or maybe I want to use this on a different web page multiple times. Then I would Command C, Command V, and now I have a copy of that element. Now, let's say I have 3 copies. I've done the user testing, and the users are like, the red's too vibrant. A soft blue would be preferred. Okay, so I'm like, great, so I'll use this color. Then how can I make these elements? Because you remember, you can have plenty of repeated elements on a page, maybe more than 10. So how would I make sure this design gets copied exactly over here? Well, I would grab the color here, put it in there, put it in there. Maybe they also want to change the size. I have to change the size, maybe check back. It may be better to write it over here. 239. And then this is 441. Right. So now I do have 3, but it was like a lot of work. And you can imagine if you have a lot of web pages, or you have a lot of different people making changes, it can be hard to keep track of. So instead, Figma's like, well, I understand that you guys may have that issue. So let me show you what you can do. I am going to create this as a component. So I just right-clicked, create as component. And you can see over here, it's changed to purple, and it's a filled in diamond. This represents that it's actually the main component, and we'll discuss why that's important later. But I'm pressing Option now because I'm on a Mac. It's Alt for Microsoft, I assume. You can see the 2 arrows change onto what I can actually make a copy of. And right now you're just like, well, it's just made a copy of it, same as Command C, Command V. But it's a little bit different because let's say I go over here, and let's say the user's like, no, actually red was better. And they move back. And you can see that now that change is being reflected. And it's not just going to be the color or the design that's going to be reflected. The child here is going to copy exactly what the parent is doing. And it's going to copy the size changes. Any changes that are made to the parent will be made to the child as well. Which is great. But now let's say that like I have these different components, but I know my child component may change slightly. It actually won't affect the parent, because what components do is like, okay, well, so for instance, if I just went there, I went to main component, it just focused in on the main component, so that way I can find that main component. But if I'm doing my main component is a parent, the child will follow exactly what the parent is doing. However, the parent will not follow exactly what the child's doing. So let's say I change this to blue. As you can see, the parent isn't changing. Let me create another child for the parent, and you can see that child's not copying as well what the child's doing. But let's say that I've made this change to a component, and rather than finding the main component again, and then making that change, being like, okay, well, I like this change, so now I need to copy those changes here. What you can do instead is you can click the child component, and I'm going to, I'm going to main component. Rather than just going to the main component, I'm going to push changes to main component. And now you can see what's happened is that the parents being like, okay, well, I'll copy those changes, and I'll also distribute it to the other children as well. Right? So this is great functionality that Figma provides, because let's say you're planning with a group, you can have a list of components that you guys are planning to use ready, rather than your team having to individually remake a copy and paste it, then going back to change it. So there's different ways in terms of how you can utilize components and how you organize it with your team. Personally, I prefer to have a components box with a rectangle just below. And this is just where I can store all my main components. So I'm just going to send this to the back. I can store my components here. That way, if anyone needs reference to where the main components are or any changes, they just need to come over here. However, there are different ways to organize your components. Obviously, you have the purple here, but it's always a good clue that if the website is tracking this for you, they probably have a way to show this themselves, and they do. If you go to assets and I go to my local components, I can see it over here. And if we go back to this special icon here and we go over to our components, it's also over here as well. And if you name your component certain things, for instance, I may call my component, I'm just going to rename it to window. Then this will be window as well. You can see over here. And if someone was just searching for window, then this would come up here, which is really easy for us to be able to find what we need. Great. So that's in terms of components, but now let's look towards actually creating that web page that we want. So I'm going to remove this star and rectangle, even though it made a beautiful homepage. And we're going to now look towards how we can actually create that navigation and use Figma to its full benefits. Great. So when we're looking at our homepage here, I probably want to start filling out in terms of where components are going to be. So I know for the application I'm planning, I want to have a nav bar at the top. I want to have a search bar somewhere here. I know I want to have maybe a vertical list here. And 2 horizontal lists just over here. Okay. Great. Over here. Beautiful. Now, in terms of the positioning, you saw that when I was positioning it, I was kind of using what Figma provided me for guides, but also Figma has different ways as well in terms of how you can position elements. So let's say over here, I have this item here. I know I want it to be around here, let's say. I'm just going to add a stroke so it's easier for us to see. Bring it to the front. Great. So for this component, I'm selecting it and I'm just going to use these positional elements at the top here. So they actually allow me to position within the design. It's like, okay, who's my parent? And this rectangle sees the homepage as its parent. Then it's like, great, I'm going to position myself in that parent according to what you select here. So, you know, this is all the way to the left, to the right, and sorry, to the center, to the right. And then this here means to the top. And so now I can center it at the top if that was my intention. Which is great. And I think that's very helpful when you're trying to organize elements within a component so you can make sure it's nice and balanced. But for now, I do know I want it for this whole page. Now, as I said before, I wanted the page in the background to be gray. So I'm just going to make that gray for us here. Okay, so these are my main components. Now, let's say that, for instance, before we were discussing how they might want to use the same web page, like a different user, or maybe I want to use a different web page that has the same dimensions. When I press Command C, Command V, I can copy it exactly. And the way how I would use that viewport again would be then I'd have to delete everything. Now that's a bit annoying. So you can see that this copy and paste is probably more useful if you're trying to show different transitions between a page. Like say, for instance, that I would be interested in having these two come together as one. So rather than that, having this. And maybe I want to show that transition, then I would go to homepage, prototype, this button here. Over here means when you click this whole element, I will go to wherever you want to lead me. So maybe I want to be more specific and I'm like, well, if you click this middle guy, then I want you to head towards this page here. So on click, I want you to navigate to the home page. So I might change the name here so it's easier for me to navigate. I'm going to be homepage combine. And so now it should also update this for me automatically. There we go, homepage combine. So now if I go to my web page, I'm going to click this element. You can already see it's clickable. If I click outside of the web page, I can clearly see what elements are clickable. I'm going to click it and it's going to lead me over here. Great. In the transition itself, there are different ones like instant or dissolve. I might go into smart animate. In order, I'm just going to go back. And you can see it was very smart in its animation in the sense that it allowed it to look like it was moving up and down. It didn't look like it suddenly instantly changed. You can change what that smart animation is as well. If I go back to the link, ease out, ease in and out, ease in and back. So you guys can change it to what you think is best, but be careful with animations. You don't want to go crazy with them because they can also be a distraction for the user. Great. So that's kind of really brief in terms of what prototyping is. Great. So now I'm put myself back in the design. And what I want to do now is focus on this navigation bar. Now there are 3 pages which I want to navigate to. I want to navigate to, so rather than home page, I'm going to call it dashboard. Then I want to navigate to profile. Or actually, I want to navigate to people. And then I want to have another page, which I'm just going to copy and paste this guy for, which is going to be for projects. And the way we'll differentiate it is so I'll have nothing there. Great. So now that we have these like 3 pages, it's like, okay, well, how do we navigate to them? Well, it's going to be similar to what we did before in terms of viewing this animation here, but we actually don't need that anymore. So that's why I've removed the prototyping link. How you remove that prototyping link is just, you would select that link and then you just delete it. It's gone. You can also use it up here. So if we add interactions, we can just take out the interaction. But yeah, so let's focus on this navigation bar. So I know I need a few things. I'm interested in terms of accessing the dashboard. So these are the buttons that are involved. When you're playing around with buttons, be careful in terms of how you want to animate them. You want to make sure it's very clear to the user, to the person who's interacting with your application, your prototype, that those are buttons. And usually a good way with that is drop buttons, but the navigation bar is somewhat self-explanatory, but just make sure it's evident. I know that there's people, and I know that there's projects. Great. So I know those are 3 pages. Now I do have the option as well to make this a component, but because I know that I want to highlight a specific page, like for instance, I'm on the dashboard, so I want to highlight the fact I'm on the dashboard by making maybe making it colored. So because I know that I want to highlight it and each of these highlights are going to be different, I'll just make 3 different components. So that way, let's say I have a few transitions I want to show on the dashboard page that require maybe 2 to 3 other pages. I can just use the dashboard component for the navigation. So let's go ahead and do that. But I also realized dashboard, people, projects, they probably want to access something personal as well to them. So there'll be a profile icon here, or at least a settings icon. Now I can go ahead and make that very complicated setting icons myself, or I can utilize a plugin. Now there are different plugins available. Over here I have Iconify and Material Design icons. I'm going to find more plugins. So you can use any icon library. I'm going to use Iconify for this scenario. I already got it here. Perfect. But essentially when you first start, it'll just be a collections list. You can go into the different categories, the different icon libraries they hold. I don't mind which icon library I'm using. Maybe your team has specified, oh, we only want icons from this library, which is fine. But for me, I'm not picky. So I'm going to focus in on this icon here because I think it's a good icon. I set the color to blue. I can change it if I want. I can also change it when it's on the Figma page itself. Rather than just importing the icon, I want to import it as a component because I realized that a lot of my components, such as the 3 different navigations bar, will require this icon, and I want to make sure they're consistent throughout. So I can also change the height if I wanted, but I'm just going to leave it. I'm importing the icon, and now the icon's over here. Beautiful. Now I'm just going to bring it up to my component, my list of components that I have here. It's very small, so I'm going to make sure I that I changed the size of it. So let's go up close. I maybe want it to be around here. I want to change the thickness of it because it's a little bit too thin and it might be hard for the user to see. So I actually have to click in onto the component and change it individually. Maybe 6 there. And then on the outside, I might aim for, maybe that'll do. And I want to change the color to something that's more consistent to my design. So I'm going to change it to a little bit of a dark blue on the outside and a light blue on the inside. Great. So that's my icon. I'm going to alt it because I'm on a Mac. And that's going to allow me to have this child component for the navigation. And I'm just going to put it over here. Great. So now I have this very general I have this very general navigation bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly have this re-implemented for projects and people by first grouping these guys together. So that way I can move it all together. There we go. Command C, Command V would just allow me to put that, but I do want to make this a component. So create component. I'm going to go dashboard nav for the name. And then I'm just going to alt and bring this over here. So now I'm just going to quickly do the same thing for people and projects. The way how I can do that is either I can copy and paste it and try figure it out, but another way is I'll do the same thing and I'll create that instance, the child of the component dashboard nav. But obviously I do want it to be, oopsie daisy, there we go. See, cache out an error, put that there, and then everything changes and I don't need to worry about it. Perfect, perfectly planned. But for creating that instance where I want people to be highlighted, what I'll actually do is I'll actually detach this instance so that way all the components are kept, but now this is no longer related to this. So if I make any changes here, let's say the O, this updates, but this doesn't update. And I'm just going to make this guy black. I'm going to make this guy blue. And then I'll create a component here. Oh, I might actually update the name first, just for ease. So I'm going to go people nav. And then I'm going to create the component. Great. And now I can just use that over here rather than having to recreate it again and again. So I'm just going to do the same for projects. So we have these 3 navs. In terms of if you do just want to keep it as one nav component and have all the others child instances, you can go ahead and do that if that's more preferable to you. Just for me, I want to keep it separate for now. So I'm going to have these 3, put them here. Obviously, anyone who's using it can access it from the places which we discussed earlier. So that special icon with components or either the assets on the side. Great. So now we've designed it, I'd be interested in now making sure I can implement it as a prototype for my high fidelity. So I want to make sure I can link everything here. So I know people goes to the people page, projects goes to the project page. And then similarly, I'd have to redo it here. So dashboard goes to dashboard, projects go to projects. Then we have dashboard going to dashboard. And then people going to the people page. Great. So now if I go back to my prototype, I should be able to, whenever clicking on something, it's able to have it. Now, if you can see over here, there is some form of transition and it's kind of making it blurry. I think that's because if I go back to there, yeah, right now Smart Animate is on. If I want to keep it as instant, I would have to click all these links and change it to instant. But yeah, for now, I don't mind leaving it as Smart Animate, which is fine. Smart Animate just kind of blends everything together like we saw before. Great, so that's really briefly in terms of making sure that navigation bar works fine, having the use of icon libraries. I'm going to come back with a semi-finished prototype of these, and then we'll kind of go ahead and start discussing a little bit more complex features, such as pop-ups, utilizing UI kits. So now you're back. I have created a UI, which is perhaps more user-friendly than what we did before. And this will help us in terms of creating that vertical scrolling, which we had for the initial box here, and then that horizontal scrolling here. And then over here, I actually have something which we can try and utilize in a sense of a button to create that pop-up. But obviously you guys may have different ways to view it. Just making sure. Great, we're able to go between pages. You can also see here that I've created, I had that initial dashboard, and then I want this dashboard to transition over here. Maybe I plan to show off what happens when you actually don't have any more notifications and you've read through everything. Then I would need a transition to show that, because you can't have all animations on one page suddenly go hidden. That's a little bit complex. You'd have different pages, which is where separating that navigation bar helps, because I can just use the dashboard one for the dashboard pages, which are repetitive. Similarly, you can see that I've implemented the same for people and people search. I want to show what happens when they type in the search bar. So if we go over to people and I click search bar, I've put a transition there where now you can see that change in position, and the separate navigation bars help me with that. But obviously it's kind of dependent to you. I did change the icon here. It's a little bit small. Probably the other one was better, but just for demonstration purposes, this is kind of the UI we'll be working with. Great. So I also have the logo itself, so you can see whatever's. Yet again, if we click on the outside of something, we're able to see what hits. If you're not on the dashboard, the logo itself also takes you to the homepage. Great, so let's get started. I guess my first interest would be getting that pop-up, because a few of us will probably, for our designs, have pop-ups involved. And it would be interesting to see how we could actually gain that pop-up. Now, you could do similar to what we've done here and create your own pop-up. However, what's the main benefit of Figma is the fact that it has such a large community. And in fact, that's what it's called. It's called Figma Community. So if I actually went back to my files and I go over here to Community, I have all these UI kits, all these example prototypes that someone else has made on Figma to either share or that I could utilize in my own design. Now, not all of them are usable. Some of them you have to pay. Some of them are just simply a preview before you have to pay for it. But some of them are free. And so it's really finding what you need and trying to utilize the best you can. There are UI kits which are available for specific devices, like iOS kits, because that helps make the device feel more real if you are using an iPhone, for instance. But for me, I'm more interested in pop-ups, right? Because I want to create a pop-up. So I'm just going to see if they have anything specific to a pop-up. If I can't find anything for pop-ups, I'm probably going to try find a UI kit for a whole application and see if that works for me. I'm just going to search pop-ups again. Great. So I'm just going to click the first one I see. Perfect. Now, there are not necessarily everything on the Figma community is free. Some of them you have to pay for, some of them you have to buy. Some of them just have an opening page to say, like this can exist. So let's open it and see. This one looks like it's only one page. I'm just going to open up and check. There we go. And you can see actually this has multiple pages. Usually if it has multiple pages, I don't know why it's not showing up here, but over here, there's usually a drop down similar to this, just showing between these pages. So here's an example UI kit. They have the color schemes, great. But most important, what I'm interested in is the design here. And so some of them, they're just pictures and you can't actually interact with anything. But we can see we're lucky here in the sense that it actually lets us play around with the components and pick what we want. So let's say, yeah, I can go with this one. I like this pop-up here. So I'm just going to Command C because I'm on a Mac. I'm going to go back to my page. Oopsie daisy. And you go back to my beautiful design that we were making. Great. I'm going to Command V. And you can see that I just copy and paste it in, it's here. And now I want to alter it so that it kind of fits my design. So I know I'm focusing on blue, white, and gray. So I want to change these guys to that color. Good, not the best, but I think we can do what we want with it. Great. So you can see already they put also a drop shadow at the back. So that also has an effect that it's coming out of the page. It's not with the page itself, which is something you guys might want to implement. I'm also going to create a component of this. Great. I'm going to call this pop-up. And I'm going to utilize it. Now I know there's a pop-up button here. You guys may have a more evident button. You could have a simple button like this. I'm just going to put this now for our purposes. So I'm going to go to prototype and I'm going to link this button here because I want this to open it. Now, if I just left it like this where it's navigate to, what you have is it's actually just going to make it the whole page, which we don't want, right? We want it to be on top. So the way how we do that is we would press open overlay. So that's going to open on top. So now if I click it, it's going to open on top. But we want that background. We want to make sure that the user's eyes are focusing here. So we want a background element that's going to make this the key focus. And the way how we'd implement that is similar to what's over here. We're going to add background behind overlay. So Figma provides that functionality for us, and you can see it's much more easier to focus on what's here. Everything is blurred out. The user can clearly see what to interact with. Now you can close when clicking outside. Figma has that option, but you can also use this button here. I'm going to link it back here. And so now it's saying on click, navigate to dashboard. Rather than just that, I'm actually going to say I want it to close the overlay. So that way it'll just close and return to the page it originally was on. So now let's see that interactability. So either I can click outside or either I'll press this button here and there we go. It also closes it for me. And so that's kind of how pop-ups work. It's very simple when you get used to it. You can also add animations with it similar to what we've seen before, but yet again, just be careful with what animations you're using. Great. So that's in terms of the pop-up. Now let's get into vertical and horizontal scrolling. So this is a little bit more complicated. But we're going to try our best. So over here, when we're looking at our components, I'm going to utilize this card. So I'm just going to copy that over there. Now I have horizontal scrolling, and essentially what we want to do is that, well, it's going to show us the max amount of elements, but for elements that go over the line, rather than like right now, if we see it, it's just going to show it as, well, these 4 elements are on top, but we kind of want this overflow here to be hidden. But the user has to scroll horizontally in order to be able to see that element. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to close that tab. Bring this guy over here. So we know that 3 is the max. We just saw that when it hits 3, it's able to fit on that panel, but anything greater, it's not able to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name so it's easier for us to distinguish it, the 4th one. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to group it so that Figma knows that these elements are together. Great. So even if I group it, it's still going to show the overflow. So what I want to actually do is I want to create a frame on top. And what that frame is going to do is it's going to say, hey, only things that are inside me are visible. So I'm going to go back over here. And so rather than group selection, I'm also going to do frame selection. Now, if I do frame selection, and I made sure I'm selecting frame 6 on the side here, where inside frame 6, I can see that group that I created. Obviously, you guys might have much more of an efficient naming structure, but I'm going to say that only these 3 elements, or maybe just up to here, so you can see the edge of the 4th element, so the user knows there's something more there. I'm going to say that I only want users to be able to see up to here. They shouldn't see anything over than that. Then the way how we can do that is we'll actually click the content. And so that way we've set the visibility to be only up to here, and we can clearly see that in our prototype. Now there's only one issue left, which we have to fix, which is in terms of scrolling. So right now I can't scroll. So the way how I'd actually do that is, well, we recognize, well, this is actually an overflow of the frame, right? And so what Figma allows is when you go to prototyping, there's overflow scrolling. So I'm going to make my overflow scrolling horizontal. Now, what that should allow is that when I go over here, I'm now able to scroll easily. And that's similarly what would be done if it was vertical scrolling, except you would set it to, you go to prototype and you would change it to vertical scrolling. You can do both as well. It kind of depends for your application. Yeah, so this is our somewhat final prototype. And if I want to share it with someone, then I will go to anyone with the link, can view or can edit or either add that collaborator. Now this is possible because I've added it already to a subfolder, but let's say I create a design and right now you can see it's in drafts. If I go over to drafts, let's say I click share, anyone with the link, only people voted is valid, but you can see now here, unlike before where I could edit the can view to can edit, I can only add view. So the person will only be allowed to view the prototype. So they add a warning here to warn you as well. To add editors, first move this file from drafts into a project. So you just have to move it into a project folder. And when you do, you can click the share icon again, and then you'll be able to access the can edit mode with the link. So just be conscious of the fact that there is that limitation in Figma. So it's really depends on you guys in terms of what functionality you want to provide, what's best for your users at the end of the day. Today, we kind of just covered some brief concepts in terms of how to create components, how to make that group work collaboration on Figma much more easier. We also went over plugins that you guys can utilize. If you plan to utilize sound, Anima is a plugin that allows you to incorporate sound into your prototype. You also have the icon plugins as well. We went over the different features that Figma allows you to play around with. We went over general prototyping, how to create a pop-up, and then as well how to do horizontal and vertical scrolling. Hopefully that will help you guys out a little bit. The only thing we didn't go into, I guess, was widgets. Widgets are kind of just like how UI kits were there, and we utilized the pop-up one. There are some widgets which you can bring into your application as well. For instance, if I want to bring this pass status button, I would just click on it and you can see over here it's brought this guy into my application and I can edit it as such that fits my application. Yeah. So you guys can kind of play around with Figma. There's a lot more things than what I've shown you today, but hopefully this will help you with implementing your prototype for your final submission. Okay, everyone, that was a very general outline in terms of what Figma offers. I'm going to go a little bit towards the specifics here, but in terms of accessibility. Now, accessibility basically means universal access for all that has different aspects to it. So, you know, those physically disabled, mentally disabled, those in a cultural context. So there's different sides to look at it, social, otherwise. But we're going to look at how Figma can help us be able to acknowledge different accessibilities. I'm specifically going to go probably towards those more with physical disabilities, ones that can possibly interact with your website while you're testing for your product that you're making at the end of this term. So Figma has a few different things which allows you to be able to test like what is good accessibility. But then in order to understand what is good accessibility, you have to be able to understand where these guidelines came from. So Figma didn't just make up their own guidelines. They were utilizing this web content accessibility guidelines created by these amazing people here. I'm going to be using 2.1. I believe 2.2 is the most current version. Feel free to use either. Obviously, the more current version is better. So in terms of the how you can access different, how you can actually utilize these guidelines yourself. So like if you were just wanting to analyze a website or your own website that you are creating, what you have here are basically different features that you can have throughout your website. You can pick one, for instance, let's go with captioning, because that's always a fun one. So over here, captions pre-recorded. Basically, this is then going to tell me how can I best cater my application towards that has captions towards those who have different accessibility issues. So you can see over here that we have level A. level AA and level AAA. What does this mean? Well, level A is like the base level. It's like, yeah, you're addressing some accessibility issues, which is great, but you're not addressing all users. Double A is also, you're not addressing all users, but you're doing a better job. This is where most companies tend to achieve core, because this is what they have in their budget to account for, because usually they have the mistake of considering accessibility as a later issue. And so to account for getting AAA, which is what most companies want to aim for, because it basically means universal access, you're addressing the most users, it can actually cost them quite a bit if they've done the planning at the later stages to include accessibility. But you guys are different. You guys are doing it from the start, which is great. But sometimes as well, AAA may be too specific that it can actually ruin what companies are aiming to do with certain features. So there's also has to be a balance in terms of like what the product's trying to do and then how accessible you can make it. Obviously, accessibility is preferred, but there's a balance that sometimes has to be done. So we're going to go into how Figma actually utilizes these different principles to be able to show you whether you are appropriately addressing these guidelines, or to check if you're violating any, to check that if you guys can be improved in that manner, in the sense like, oh, this is where you're failing, this is what you can do better. One to look at that I'm going to be looking into is color contrast. It's one that's used throughout websites quite often. Feel free to go through this use of color for web accessibility guidelines if you want to see how this is going to relate to what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm currently in the Desmond 2000 demo, the Figma we made, which is great. Now I want to try and assess my website, right? If you're just trying to assess a general website, a good one is MWave. They're great because, sorry, accessibility, I should write, sorry, just Wave, I believe, actually. Wave accessibility. Sorry, over here, this one. I can edit this. You chuck in a website, let's pick, why don't we pick UNSW? And what it's going to do is it's going to be like, I'm going to check against those accessibility guidelines we just saw, and I'm going to find what all the errors and stuff is, and I'm going to tell you what the issue is, and then hopefully you can go ahead and improve it. Okay. Basically, Figma has something like that. Basically, you can use external apps which are provided by the Figma community to be able to allow you to do additional things other than just what the features that Figma provides. And for accessibility, that involves doing a similar thing with the Wave report, where it'll analyze the UI you give it and it'll give you feedback. They can even do a step better and allow you to adjust accordingly on that UI to be able to meet those criteria as well. There's a few different examples on how this is done. There's so many different plugins for accessibility, but we'll only go through a few. So let's look over here. I'm going to go to plugins. Here's a preview on what we're going to be looking at. But I'm going to go to find more plugins, and I'm going to go A11Y. A11Y is also Ally, and it's also the short form of accessibility. So you can see over here, there's many different types. Stark is a very common one. HCL Easy. These are all different ones which you can use. So feel free to explore. The ones I'm showing you are just like to get you started in terms of what you can be looking at for your products that you're making. So I'm going to go over to our Ally color contraster, and I'm just going to click it. So it says select a frame, which I'm going to do. I'm going to select our frame, and you can see now good affordance. This has turned into blue. I'm going to click check, and let's see if I've done a good job. So what originally looked good to us, and it's very similar in terms of how other websites present their web pages. If I go over to the color contraster, which is checking against the web content accessibility guidelines, I'm not doing the best job I can. Okay, good. Like for some of them, I'm doing good. Well, what does this also provide me in order to make it easy for me to figure out what I can do? Well, it lets me change the background to lightness, the text lightness, whatever's relevant. And you can see over there, now I've hit this. Now you can see, oh, maybe this isn't as best of a UI change, or maybe because now that you've become slowly you have a better eye for accessibility, you can see, well, now the inbox doesn't pair well. So rather than clicking done and then rerunning it to test the component, you can then go, okay, well, how can I fix this? Well, maybe instead I'll make the inbox text white, right? So it's a little bit of a balance you're going to have to pick in terms of when you use these plugins, because at the end of the day, they're doing their best to automate something which is hard to automate. That's also where your user testing down the line can also help out. So there's different ways where you can user test accessibility. When you user testing accessibility, either you do get a user who has the accessibility issue, or either you do role playing. Now, role playing involves the other user
which could be one of your group members, pretending to have an accessibility, but it's not just like they're like, okay, well, this is how colorblindness I think it is, I'm going to go for it. No, what they actually do is they're like, okay, I'm going to do research on what this person is, what this persona is, for their accessibility. I'm going to research how it affects their daily life, how it affects them and similar products like ours, and then I'm going to replicate that while we do a practice test environment. That way, you can also have a general idea as well in terms of, is your product actually accessible for this person? Cool. So that's one of the things that you guys can use. There are so many others, and I think I might show you another one. So one other way to do accessibility testing is also through simulations. So simulations just means like, hey, would you like to see, would you like to be put in the user's shoes, right? So like if I want to test color blindness, I should be able to see how it would look like if they were looking at this UI instead. So some people may see it black and white, some people may see it in different colors. So we want to be able to see like, oh, is the contrast high enough? Sure. But then is it like, if I'm highlighting something red and green, is that now no longer efficient for these people with these accessibility issues? So I'm going to click done over here, and I can recheck it as well, but I'm going to go over here to my plugins again, and I'm actually going to look at colorblind. Now there's two different apps for colorblind. I think they're both fun. I'm going to show you how they differ. I think it might be fun to do that. So I'm going to actually go to this one over here, go back here, run over here, and I'm going to click colorblind. Let's run this one. Okay, so over here you can see what happens is, based on the component which I've selected, they've been like, okay, well, here's different previews of how your UI would look. So you can see over here, might be hard to see actually. Let me quickly go up close to the one which has the main changing factor, and then we can run back into it. Plugins, colorblind. So you can see how it's changing accordingly. These are different colorblind types that you can test against. And then if I click insert image, what it's doing is it's actually gone, well, here is the image of the issue. If you want to try changing things on it, you really can't. And this is why I prefer the other colorblind type. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go to the next plugin. I'm going to click find more plugins, and I'm going to click this colorblind type. Ooh, but I haven't clicked the frame. So let me quickly go back and do that now. Go back to plugin. Let's go back to the recent one. Cool. So I've selected this guy and I'm interested. I'm actually just going to move this guy a little bit more down. I'm going to click create views. Now what it's done is it's actually created different views of each of the types here. So probably, you know, I clearly have the best pronunciation in the world. But for each one, and you can check which one is from down over here, it'll be able to tell you, because rather than just an image, this is actually interactable components now. So if you specifically want to grab components or make changes, or you realize, oh, this is better, or this is actually consistent through multiple, then you can grab that and start utilizing that in your actual components, right? And you can see it's still carrying the same structure of like, what's a component, what the different layers are. So you guys are welcome to use this. You can see how helpful it was. If you just want to grab a preview image and see how it would look like, see if it's still good UI, then feel free to go for that. If you feel like you want to grab interactable components, please feel free to go for that. The last plugin which I'll show you is probably the one which we're most comfortable with, which is text to speech, a very comfortable tool that a lot of people use. So let's go over to plugins and let's have a little look. I'm going to go to find more plugins. Oops, let's go find more plugins. Okay, let's just write speech to text and see what we come out with. Okay, so I get hey Figma. So let's run this guy and see what pops up. Okay, cool. Now that we have the plugin open, I'm actually going to leave it up to you guys. So you guys feel free to take this as your first step to start investigating the plugins. There are so many more plugins out there. Figma has so many different varieties in terms of the features it provides. The best way to start is usually in the Figma community. Feel free to start poking around there. Like you just saw, for instance, just to find the plugin app I needed, I just wrote speech to text. You guys can do that in the Figma community. If you know there's something in particular you're looking for, you can just write the natural language of it, and then the search results will come up with something similar. But yeah, best of luck, and feel free to ask any questions as well. Always happy to learn something new, as well as to teach others as well. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.